Omari King Wise Barksdale. As an activist, Omari has been involved in a multitude of activities and programs in which he has been called upon to provide his voice as a speaker, poet, ally, or giving assistance with his hands. Since becoming active, he has worked in the capacity of legislative assistant for the Detroit City Council and waged a strong campaign for state representative for the 4th District of the State of Michigan legislature. Omari has also extended his hand to work with many community organizations and governing bodies, both locally and across state lines, to fight against various forms of injustice. Most notably, Omari is part of the SASHA Center team as a facilitator to help educate young men in Detroit, Michigan high schools about the very serious realities of gender-based violence, anti-women culture, and to provide bystander intervention training. Since emerging as one of Detroit's more preeminent performance artists in 2001, Omari has held the attention of audiences across the country, including representing Detroit, Michigan as a member of 7 national poetry slam teams, 2008 Grand Slam champion, and the 2007 Rust Belt Championship Slam team.
Welcome to the Conversations with Kai Mann. I'm your host, Kai Mann, and this is the show where we bridge the gaps one story at a time. And today we are sitting here with Omari King Wise Barksdale. Now, if you know who this man is, you know that he is more than just an ally to women. He is masculinity for femininity, and it is totally amazing the things that he speaks about. So today we were going to have an awesome conversation with him. Thank you, Omari, for coming on the show. We appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yes. You're welcome. You're welcome. I have been wanting to talk to you for quite some time now. You have this whole view on what masculinity is. Where did this platform come from?
Well, I think it came from a few different places.
Okay.
One is I grew up in a household with 6 women. Mm-hmm. So as a very young boy, I was the man of the house, so to speak.
Right.
I had a lot of positive male influence, especially from my uncles who were like fathers to me when my father was in and out. And I observed a lot as a child, things that I knew I wanted to be, things I knew I didn't want to be, attributes I saw in people. I never looked at a person as a total one thing. So while my father fought for sobriety, he was not just an alcoholic. He was not just a drug user. I saw the positive things in the heart that he had. So I never saw people as this one thing, but what I always saw, even from a young age, is that men, we seem to be trapped inside of a body that's built for us, as opposed to a body that we build for ourselves. So, and then being around poets and activists, you just tend to pick up a lot of things and say, oh, I need to work on that on myself. I need to add that to myself and take that out of myself. So, being around activists like Kalima Johnson and Tracy Curry, who's a doctor and educator at U of M Flint, and several other people just pulled me to the side a lot and said, you get this, and that, but you don't get this. You need to think about this. You need to read this. So, from my own observations, from my family, and from my social circle.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, I think you are the masculine voice for femininity. I think that just watching you and the things that you do, I appreciate you in this female body that I uphold. I appreciate you and the things that you are saying and doing, and you are saying and doing a lot in the community. The one thing that you talk a lot about is rape, and how it's not the woman's fault, and how we give all these different excuses as to why it happened. How do men start to look at things differently, start to look at rape differently?
Well, first off, and I say this often, and it may even sound cliche at this point, but it only sounds cliche because it's so simple. A woman doesn't rape herself. A woman doesn't abuse herself. This is something that a man does to her. When it's a male-female scenario, this is what a man does to her. So this means that it's his issue. So what she is a victim and eventual survivor, hopefully. She survives the situation, so she becomes a survivor of his issues. Because the reason why he's raping, the reason why he's abusive, is because issues that he hasn't resolved or that he is not capable of understanding within himself. And the social training that he ingested that helped him to push himself over the edge to becoming, a predator. So there's a woman's clothing does not talk. It doesn't reach out and grab you and pull you in. It doesn't text you and say, I want you to do X, Y, and Z to me. There's no rape-proof clothing. If it was, Macy's would carry it, Target would carry it, a whole lot of companies would really, really profit off it. There's no rape-proof clothing. And because there's no rape-proof clothing and a woman's clothing does not have the characteristics to speak and touch and reach out and grab, then obviously this starts with him. Mm-hmm. So this means that he is the only person to blame. We try to teach women in our society to not be raped, but we almost never try to teach men not to rape women. So as long as we're in a position of not addressing the origin of the problem, what we have is addressing the people who are being victimized by the symptoms.
Right. Wow. Now, because of the fact you said you grew up with 6 sisters?
Yeah, 2 sisters, 2 aunts,
a
mother and a grandmother. 6 women in the house.
So 6 women in the house with you, and it makes for good upbringing, I think, because it gives you that balance of sensitivity because of the fact that you grew up with women, so you kind of know them a little bit more. What has been one of the values of women that men probably mistake?
Okay, so first off, before I answer that question, I have to say that, and I'd be remiss to say that, I'm 42 years of age, and I am currently fighting for my own personal growth out of patriarchy, right? And even with growing up in a house with 6 women, I still grew up with patriarchal, misogynistic, sexist views. And I still catch myself as I'm talking or thinking, I still catch myself. And sometimes I don't, but my friends catch me in having these same thoughts. So the value, to speak to your question, the value that men most often miss with women is the opportunity to understand that they are dynamic, beautifully complex, and a teammate, whether it's friendship, whether it's a romantic relationship, a coworker, but the value that they bring so many understandings and the yin to the yang cache of knowledge that we could never have because we've never been them.
Well, we're going to go ahead and take a break. That's good. I want you guys to go ahead and marinate on that. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. This is the Conversations with Kai Mann show. I'm your host, Kai Mann, and we'll be right back.
One of the things I've dealt with was sexual addiction. And contrary to what folks believe, it's not simply about too much sex. Some argue that sex is not addictive because there are no chemicals involved. But the body produces many hormones and neurotransmitters during sex that produce the same chemical high as drugs or alcohol. Like other addictions, a sex addict's background often stems from abuse and or neglect. And because sex is such a taboo topic, people are ashamed to talk about it. Therefore, they avoid it, which can lead to sexual secrets and a host of other things. What makes it an addiction is when we continue to engage in high-risk sexual situations that include the transmission of diseases by having sex with multiple partners, anonymous partners, and even simultaneous or repeated sequential affairs. 18 to 24 million Americans can be classified as sex addicts. 25 million Americans spend between 1 and 10 hours per week watching online porn. It wasn't until I decided that I only get one body and it must be cherished that my life changed. Be safe. Love your body. Join the movement. Hashtag get naked.
And welcome back to the Conversations with Kai Mann show. I'm your host, Kai Mann, and this is the show where we bridge the gaps, one story at a time. Today we're sitting here talking with Omari King Wise Barksdale, and he is wise, y'all. He is wise. I want to talk to you about, I watched your videos. You have some YouTube videos that are out there, and I have to study who I'm talking to. And you talk about the evolution of masculinity. Can you speak to that a little bit?
So when I talk about the evolution, finding the masculine evolution, we, in a lot of senses, when you look at the cultural aspect of life, especially when you transfer back through time in some of our African nations, in some of our systems of belief, such as Ma'at and so on and so forth, where there was more balance and there was more appreciation from the masculine and the feminine from both sides. We have de-evolved because we have been undergoing these social trainings. As societies around the world have all contributed and influenced American society. So when you look at the Holocaust and the Ma'afa, the slave transatlantic slave trade, when you look at all of these horrific things that bred not just hatred towards humans, but more specifically, even more hatred designed towards women. We have ingested all of this and we've incorporated it into our society. I mean, we are in 2016, yet women make 75 to 77 cents on a dollar that a man makes. The disparities between what women are able to enjoy and what men are able to enjoy are quite often very vast. So this means that we are benefiting from the loss of women, much like white supremacy in black folks. I mean, I always say for every credit there must be a debit, which is a statement from our fraternity. So this means that for every benefit there's somebody who is receiving the low end of privilege. So when we talk about the evolution of masculinity, what this is isolating those things that are positive in manhood and masculinity and incorporating them into ourselves and starting to siphon out those things that are not so healthy. So, for example, you may have, when you look at manhood, it's often said that a man is supposed to be a provider. Well, genuinely, that's not a negative thing. But if you put it in certain context, it becomes negative. So, for example, if you say specific man needs to be the provider, but he tells his wife she can't work because he's supposed to provide, but she wants to work, then this is when it starts to overstep the boundaries into control and insecurities. So these are the things we need to evolve from, because there's a positive side of that spectrum, there's a negative side. We need to decide consciously to choose the positive side.
Right. So what does a healthy male or healthy masculinity look like? What does that look like?
Okay. And would probably take a much longer segment than we have today, but I'll just start with a very simple baseline. A healthy man and healthy masculinity, generally speaking, for society, does not require the diminishing of women in order to feel strong and feel balanced and feel secure. So we don't have to tear women down in order to feel like we're standing strong within ourselves. It doesn't alienate women from decision making, from emotions that are interconnected. It doesn't teach young men to go out in the world and conquer women, and we tell the young women to avoid young men that want to conquer women at the same time. It's just not, it can't coexist. And what we get is what we see now. A healthy man is a man that resolves his control issues, or at least consciously works every day towards resolving those issues. So a healthy man is a man that looks at the things that are negative, that he does and he contributes to, that negatively impacts women and girls and other men, and starts to work on those specific things to try to, like I said, they say it takes as long to break a habit as it takes to make a habit. But if you take a long time starting to break those habits, you'll never get around to it. So we have to start to break our masculine addictions, which include things like control issues, needing to be the king of the mountain, the alpha male complex, and things like this, calling women outside their names, instead of learning to specifically identify the problem you have specifically with that individual woman. You call out her name, and your problem is she was dishonest to you. Just call her this. Just say she was dishonest to you, and it bothered you.
Wow. We, as women who have sons and we're trying to raise them, what are some, especially if women, single mothers who are trying to raise men, what are some things that they can do to bring up a healthy male child?
That's a great question, because what we have is a society that tells women that they can't raise men. Yet, we have a society full of men that are not successfully raising men. So the first thing we need to do is those women need to identify literature, speakers. There are people out here like Tony Porter and Byron Hurt who have videos online and materials available. Start to identify those conversations with men, between men, and teach a healthy view of women, and pay attention to your child's social circle. Because if he's hanging out with those type of young men that are contributing the recycling of misogyny, then he's going to bring that home. He's going to always keep that with him. So put him in the positive circles, put him in the right circles, keep him busy with what you plan for him. Find something that he's interested in and be involved in it with him so you can monitor what's going on in those atmospheres. But it's mostly literature, finding more people who are speaking publicly about these issues, and also teaching them empathy from the standpoint of having them help you go work with agencies, volunteer, that are agencies that support women who have been victimized, and women who are survivors, and children as well. Empathy is our problem. We can't reattach ourselves to our humanity as long as we don't understand empathy, and we need to ingrain that in our children.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back. This is the Conversations with Kai Mann show. I'm your host, Kai Mann, and this is the story where we bridge the gaps one story at a time. We'll be right back.
Focus One Entertainment is Detroit's premier entertainment company. But we're not just an entertainment company. We are your #1 multimedia resource. Focus One has combined years of talent and experience in order to bring you what you're looking for in a video, a polished professional product. F1 Entertainment specializes in filming workshops, seminars, and corporate presentations. More and more businesses are utilizing video production services to create web virtuals, online marketing content, and promotional and corporate training videos. Your company can do the same with Focus One Entertainment. Contact Focus One Entertainment at 313-444-3638 or visit us on the web at www.focusoneentertainment.com.
One of the things I've dealt with was suicide, having thoughts of it and making attempts at it. I felt like I was a burden to others and had no reason to live. So I isolated myself by drinking, doing drugs, and becoming reckless. Did you know that after cancer and heart disease, suicide accounts for more years of life lost than any other cause of death? And even though men are more likely to die by suicide, women are more likely to attempt it. It wasn't until I rediscovered my passions and talents that my life changed. Look within. Get to your core. Join the movement. #GetNaked.
And we are back. This is the Conversations with Kai Mann show. I'm your host, Kai Mann, and we are sitting here today talking with Omari King Wise Barksdale. I have a question for you.
Okay.
And the question is, we have, sometimes there are mothers who are raising sons, and because of the fact that we've lived in this misogynistic world, we ourselves have some misogynistic views. So we kind of sometimes train our children, our sons, up with the same views. How do we, as women, work to I guess, change that ideal?
Okay. So first off, and I should have said this earlier, the world is taught patriarchy. There are very few matriarchal societies, but the world is taught. So when you look at it, and oftentimes for our society, we relate more to racial issues than we do to gender issues. So it's always easy to point at racism and white supremacy and use that as a baseline of understanding. So in the black community, what you have is people who have reached levels of apathy, but you also have people who have reached levels of sympathy towards people who want to or would oppress you. So there is kind of a complex in which we take on the role of custodian over our own oppression, but not because we want to, but because it's been thrown on us so heavy that we believe that it's true and it's real and it's what needs to happen. So how do we stop that? Because there are a lot of women who reject feminism and womanism, right? So that's just a reality that exists. But what we need to start teaching is self-preservation and understanding what those things are, you know, those aspects of life that are self-preserving. So for a woman to, which often happens, to attempt to explain away a rapist's actions or an abuser's actions, well, she shouldn't have been mouthing off, or she shouldn't have been out there. She knew that if she took a drink, she could, you know, all of these things. So when they start to explain away and victimize and victim blame other women, these are custodianship issues of the oppressor. So we need to start identifying these things, and we need to start really having these conversations, because right now what you're getting is no real conversations about how women contribute to patriarchy. I haven't seen a town hall meeting. I haven't seen a Facebook page dedicated to it. I haven't seen so many different things that we often have when it comes to cancer or when it comes to the economy. And like, we're not really addressing this issue. So there are a lot of things that can do to change, but we have to really let people realize that it even exists, that women even contribute to this in order to even start there. And the conversation has to happen.
Right, that's true, so true. You have evolved in yourself. What have been some of the issues that you've had trouble kind of moving into different spaces?
So I think that the one I identified with the most and out of the masculinity addictions that I identified is the superhero complex, right? Because for years I bodyguard, I bounced, and I was the protector of a household. And I've always had, because I grew up around women, I've always held women close to me as friends. And I always was the dude they called when something went wrong, when a guy did something crazy, or when a guy threatened, and I'd be there. But I realized that now if I'm there, I'm mostly there out of love and support, and because I don't want to see them hurt. But before, I was there mostly because I felt like it was my job. And I felt like I would be seen as less than a man if I didn't show up to prevent something, or, you know. So the meaning has changed, but I still fight that superhero complex. It's still embedded and it's still crazy within me, so I still work against that.
Well, before we get into anything else, we're going to go ahead and take another break, and we will be right back. This is the Conversations with Kai Mann show, where we bridge the gaps one story at a time. And today we're talking with Omari Barksdale. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Focus, the state or quality of having or producing clear definition. Focus One Entertainment is the premier videography company in the Midwest. We specialize in weddings, corporate events, documentaries, sporting events, and films. Regardless of the scope or budget, we approach every project the same way, by capturing and clearly defining your vision. Contact us at 313-444-3638 or www.focusoneEntertainment.com.
One of the things that I've dealt with was depression, feelings of sadness and loneliness from what I used to have. Most of us feel depressed at times, that's normal. But when it lasts more than 2 weeks and it begins to interfere with your daily activities like work, school, or taking care of the kids, that's when you should talk to a professional. 3 to 5% of most people suffer from depression. It wasn't until I addressed what was going on inside of me, and instead of suppressing it, that my life changed. Talk to someone. You matter. Join the movement. #GetNaked.
And welcome back. This is the Conversations with Kai Mann show. I'm your host, Kai Mann, and today we are sitting here and we're talking with Omari King Wise Barksdale. Omari, it has been a pleasure talking to you. It has been actually a pleasure to sit and watch and to kind of be in the background watching your conversations and your interactions with the world, basically. How has it been for you to move into the spaces or to be able to just talk about these different issues so openly? Have you always been able to do that?
I've always been able to do it, I was less equipped to do it. And over the last few years, I've undergone some training, and I've added people to my circle of life that give me information and knowledge and understanding. It's really easy to talk about it. It's not real easy to get an audience, because this is a subject most people want to just act like it isn't there, because it hurts on so many levels. It hurts both men and women. So when you think about the people, like I think about the people in my life that have been murdered and harmed, and it fuels me to go out and talk. That makes it so much easier, because at this point, somebody I love, somebody I know, or even somebody I heard of just got killed. So what do I have to fear by speaking? They weren't able to sit in a private space and enjoy themselves. So this fuels me to go out and talk. It's not real easy to get speaking gigs where I can talk about this. I've had universities shut me down. You know, when in the middle of contract talk, we don't want that discussion here. You know, I've had a lot of pushback from men who don't want this conversation to happen. So getting into the spaces is not easy, but once I'm in the space, it's a very, very comfortable feeling, because I feel that what I'm doing is my mission, and it's coming from my heart and from a spiritual perspective. I'm accountable to it and responsible for it. So I have no problem speaking about it.
There you have it. Why do you think it is that you're having that pushback? Because it is a conversation. Although there's been some hurt, there are some things, some training, some words. There's some atmosphere. There's a shift that really needs to happen. And you would think with things that happen at a university, you know, colleges around the country, that those are some things that they would want to have in their orientation. Why do you think that that's a hard topic for them to even want to bring into their schools?
So the students don't push for it. The more students push for something, the better the chances of that school accepting it and not wanting to go against the students. There'll be a group of 5 or 10 students, or maybe even 20, 25 students pushing for it. But that's not a significant enough number to move an administration. Oftentimes the administrations are led by men. Men have this very specific overhanging privilege. So in order for them to co-sign this coming into their space that they control, they have to allow their privilege to be attacked. And as we've seen many times throughout the world, nobody likes their privilege attacked. Nobody likes their privilege questioned. In fact, nobody likes their privilege highlighted. So this makes for a very, very tough situation in having conversations.
You would think most men have a mother, a sister, somebody, a cousin, you know, in their lives that they wouldn't want anything to happen to. How is it that we can still, you know, say, we don't really want to talk about this. Mm-hmm. We really don't want to talk about this when it's something that needs to be talked about consistently in every corner, everywhere.
Well, you know, first off, a lot of people in this world just think stuff won't happen to them. You know, I won't get cancer. I won't get AIDS. I won't get beat up. A lot of people just think a lot of stuff won't happen to them. You can be the first person to go on Mac and Bewick in Detroit with $8,000 attached to your t-shirt and not get robbed. You know what I mean? So we think it won't happen to us. But more importantly, our privilege is such a major comfort that we're almost willing to sacrifice the women we love to allow our privilege to persist.
Wow. We're going to let that one soak in.
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. This is the Conversations with Kai Mann show, and I'm talking with Omari King Wise Barksdale, and we'll be right back.
One of the things I've dealt with was low self-esteem due to body image. Growing up, I thought I was a cute girl, but it wasn't until I was 11 or 12 that I noticed I wasn't built like the boys necessarily liked. My friends teased me for having a flat butt and a flat chest. Ultimately, this bruised my esteem. Did you know 44% of schoolgirls attempt to lose weight compared to only 15% of boys? And did you know 70% of girls ages 15 through 17 avoid normal daily activities, even like going to school, just because they feel bad about their looks? This type of negative self-thinking usually follows us into adulthood and affects our interpersonal relationships. It wasn't until I fell in love with me and accepted me for who I was that changed my life. Think and speak kindly of yourself. Join the movement. #GetNaked.
This is the Conversations with Kai Mann show. I am Kai Mann. Welcome back. We are still sitting here and talking with Omari Barksdale, and we're talking about masculinity. We're talking about some privileges that masculinity holds. But what a lot of times we really don't talk about is how we get to that point of thinking that men should be one specific sort of way. Can you talk about some of the characteristics or some of the scenarios that happen to make men feel that they are either superior, that they they have to be a certain way? What defines masculinity for them?
Well, there's this invisible handbook called the Man Code, right? There have been commercials made that talk about this Man Code. It's been mentioned in movies. This mythological book, that maybe somebody has actually written by now, but didn't really exist throughout the ages. In our conversations amongst men, we are not honest, and we would never honestly discuss our conversations amongst men. In fact, according to the Man Code, I am violating the Man Code right now by even saying this. So when we sit in locker rooms are full of bullying and joking at the expense of the person that is deemed the weakest. Sometimes it is an even exchange, but oftentimes these jokes refer to the person who's on the horrible end of the joke as something that is either woman or homosexual. So the joke is homophobic, the joke is misogynistic or sexist. So how do I diminish another man? I make him appear to be feminine. I make him appear to be same gender loving. And this gets everybody laughing. Almost no other joke in the locker room works. These jokes are very, very, very redundant. So when you watch television, boys are taught to like a certain type of cartoon. Girls are taught to like a certain different type of cartoon. We're taught to like two different colors. We basically are taught that we are on two different spaces in the universe, but that we must converge to create more children that can continue to separate the gender. And then we're not even really honest with genders, because there are a whole lot of different genders. There's not just two genders. There's not just male and female. There are varying degrees of gender even within males and females. So, and that doesn't even speak to anything sexual necessarily. So we're being taught that we're two different hardline genders and that we have to live in two different spaces. Men are taught to like big trucks, action movies, steak and potatoes, blue, very feminine women, all of these things. And if this is what you genuinely and naturally like without a bunch of other influences, that's cool. Unfortunately, what happens is we don't genuinely come to these understandings. We don't genuinely come to these likes and dislikes. In fact, they're beat out of us, sometimes physically, sometimes verbally. You can't play with that girl's toy. A father will admonish his son for that and sometimes beat him for it. So it is just like training animals in the wild to be exactly what you want them to be. And we perpetuate this on, and the more individual you are, the less acceptable you are. When it should really just be the other way around. So we want clones to continue the clone race.
Wow. That's deep. We are, as a society, like you said, we're cloning each other. In the spaces that we're having these types of conversation to where we begin to start with ourselves, how do we declone ourselves? How do we begin to look at things differently?
We have to start to appreciate the art within humanity, the art of individuals. Like, it's something very artistic about somebody who can go in a thrift shop and throw a bunch of different things together and come out their own special way, clothing wise. There's something very artistic about an autistic child who can draw such beautiful imagery and show so much love, more sympathy and empathy towards humans than a person who's not considered autistic. There's something beautiful about everything and everybody. We gotta stop beating that out of each other. We have to start to find the value in that. We have to reattach ourselves to our humanity. Like I said before, without empathy, there's no humanity. If we can't empathize with each other, but we desensitize each other. Our TV shows help desensitize us. If a woman walks in a police station to report a sexual assault, police officers are often desensitized because they hear so many of these reports, and at some point in time, everything they have in the back of their mind, the patriarchal thoughts, the victim blame, and all of that comes to the front and meets the frequency. So there's no humanity in that space. If you think about a woman who's sexually assaulted, she goes to get a rape kit. It's often a man that does it. She goes to talk to the police. It's often a man. She goes to talk to the district attorney. It's often a man. And then she sees the judge. It's often a man. We don't have enough diversity in our spaces between men and women. There should be more women in these positions. There should be more women out here advocating from the position of being a judge and the position of being a DA. But we force women out of those spaces to try to keep them from walking into it. So the more we can empathize with each other, the more we can find our humanity, and then we become water and we find our own balance. But as long as we're rejecting that and forcing everything against it, we can't reach that. And that's to the benefit of men, so we think. And we have to stop wanting that benefit.
We have men and women who are in a space of wanting to be and to do and to live differently. But again, we have people around us who consistently, believe the opposite of what it is that we're now trying to retrain ourselves to believe. What do we need to do in order to kind of move away from those people, those situations? Or should we be trying to, hold our own and, and teach them what we're learning? What should we be doing?
Well, I think that you do you always represent what you feel and who you feel you are. And if others fall in line, that's great. You don't have a whole lot of control over that. You try to teach the people, you try to open them up, but at some point in time when you realize you're spinning your wheels with a specific person or a specific group, you have to keep it moving, because that is taking the time away from your happiness. That's taking the time away from your progression and your successes and so on and so forth. So yeah, sure, try to work with people if you can. If they're not open to it, they might be open 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, but right now, you have to push through them, because you have to take care of yourself.
That's true. Well, we're gonna take our last break. This is the Conversations with Kai Mann show. I am your host, Kai Mann, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Conversations with Kai Mann show. I'm your host, Kai Mann, and this is the show where we bridge the gaps, one story at a time. And I'm sitting here and I'm talking with Omari Barksdale. Now, Omari, you are this wonderful person.
Oh, thank you.
Who do we have to really thank for the person that you are right now?
So many people. My village is strong and wide and broad, and I would be foolish to try to name all of them right now, but I have to start with my grandmother, who came over from Canada after the family escaped slavery years ago. She decided to come back to the country, and her and my mother ran the household. My uncle, who's retired chief of police in Flint, Michigan, was always like my father. I had mentors. Mr. Richard Walker, who works at Martin Luther King High School right now, still mentoring children. People in college, Raymond Gant, who I found out was a relative of mine after he had already been my mentor at the university. Kalima Lockmama Johnson, who is the founder of SASHA Center, which is a great organization that I work with as a facilitator. I could name so many people, but each one of them brought something specifically and individually powerful to me, and I appreciate each and every one of them for that. So know that net, that web, has been woven to cover an entire ocean, and I still don't feel like I've lived up to what they have all given to me, but I work every day to try to.
And what are some of the things, when you said that you work every day to try to, what are some things that you do as Omari to work at those things?
So I try to learn a little bit more. I'll read, or I'll sit down and write about a specific thing, because a lot of times, you examine and you understand your own philosophies once you write them out, and you can see where you need to tweak them. But I try to learn a lot. Each day I might learn something about masculinity or something about gender-based violence. I might talk to a colleague and ask them what they've learned today, what they know today, or take a look at one of my lectures. Tell me where you find the gaps and the holes that I need to work on. And then when I come home, I'll work within a relationship and make sure I am giving in that relationship what I'm asking everyone outside to give to the rest of the world. And that could be a personal or romantic relationship, or a friendship, or a family member. So I work on catching myself when I say something really harmful, and going back and trying to examine the space in my brain that allowed that to feel right when I said it. You know what I mean? And just things like that. Wow. I need to do more push-ups and eat better.
I think most of us can say that.
Right, they can't see the stuff.
You have been, I'm quite sure, an amazing spirit out here in the universe. That there has been, I know, probably thousands of lessons that you have learned. But what has been the most valuable for you?
And I know I'll sound redundant when I say this, but humanity. You often hear people say stuff like, you're human before you're Muslim, you're human before you're Christian, human before you're a black woman, human. And that never really meant anything to me till just a few years ago. And, watching, especially watching my mother fight three cancers off at the same time. Before anything, my mom was human. She's not even my mother yet. She's human. But watching her strength and her power to get through that, and she's still right down the street from me. But, that's the biggest empathy. I can't stress it enough. One thing we need to start doing in our schools every day, before and after everything, is empathy building.
Well, we're gonna go ahead and I want you to tell everybody how they can reach you, how they can talk with you, where they can find you.
Okay, all right. So simply put, best way to contact me is email, and that's omaripoetry@gmail. Omari is spelled O-M-A-R-I. omaripoetry@gmail. Or you can find me, Omari Barksdale, on Facebook. Omari3EO on Instagram. And I don't give out my phone number unless I'm getting money. No, I'm just playing. I don't give out my phone number because I change it often. So so it's best to find me at email, and I respond to email very quickly.
Awesome. Well, what I would love for you to do is to leave our viewers with what you believe is the legacy that you'll leave with the rest of the world when you're no longer here.
Yeah, it's amazing that you mentioned the word legacy, because one of my best friends, Shantae Legacy Lenderrick, a poet, passed last year from brain cancer. And one of the legacies I want to leave is one that she would be proud of. And the legacy I would like to leave is one that is a very significantly healthier space for women and girls, a space that is healthy for young boys to be able to express themselves emotionally and intellectually without being penalized for their thoughts, and one that is a space where love is much more important than image and ego, because us men, we have some egos on us. and if we can start to conquer and deflate our own egos, we'll find value in our expressions with one another.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. We have been honored by your presence. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You're quite welcome. You're quite welcome. This has been the Conversations with Kai Mann show. I know that you enjoyed Omari King Wise Barksdale. Make sure that you come back next Wednesday for a new guest. Thank you for being here.